Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Memis, joined by Matt McCarthy. He's an Ithaca College alum of 2013. He's also host of 98.5 The Sports Hub, Hardcore Baseball. Matt, how are you doing today?
Michael, I'm doing awesome. It's great to be back on, with Ithaca folks. It's like, one of the coolest parts of my life was being at Ithaca College, working on ICB. So I'm doing great. It's good to hear from you.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you too. So, I guess you talked about all your experience at Ithaca College. What would be your one favorite thing if you could pin it down to one or maybe one or two?
All right. God, I don't know if I can pin it down to one or two, but you know what I miss the most is just like those late nights in the park building, like in, working on projects with my friends or, doing shows with my friends, calling football games with my friends. Like that's kind of what it all comes back to, is that it was probably the most formative, moment of my life and my career. It's, the reason, basically the sole reason I'm doing what I'm doing. And, the reason I'm in this field is because of my time and my experience at Ithaca, at ICB, at the Park School. So like, that's what I miss the most is just, hanging out with all my friends, just learning about the business and learning about radio and learning about broadcasting. Like, I don't know if I can pick one specific moment that sticks out. Like, I mean, calling the Cora jug game was great. Like all of those things, there are just so many memories that kind of come back to me. But it's honestly like the stupid little things that I miss. It's like just, oh, that time where we had, a project that was due late and we stayed in park till like 4 a.m. Like, yeah, you didn't like it then, but like those are the types of things that you look back on and reflect, and you say like, that was just so cool. Like it was just one of the coolest experiences of my life. So it was just like, it couldn't have been a better place for me. It was perfect. I made, the friends of my life at Ithaca, and it's the reason I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Now, have you visited Ithaca since you graduated, or you have
Oh
not been there
yes.
since?
Oh yes. No, I have been back. Yeah, it was kind of a running joke. So I graduated early. I was a December graduate, and I actually transferred in as a sophomore. So I was friends with a lot of people in the class of 2014. Like all my best friends were essentially class of 2014. So yeah, I came back a lot after I graduated. I came back basically way too much, probably. It was a running joke between me and all of my friends. And about the first year out of college, I was there like basically any weekend I could do. Like it was just crazy. I'd like call up my friends on a Thursday. I'm like, guys, like I'm not working this weekend. I'm coming up. So yeah, no, I've been back quite a bit, as we've kind of moved away from that. And like I don't, all my friends have since graduated. Like I haven't been back as much, but I've been back for a few alumni weekends. And we were supposed to come out, one of my good friends was supposed to get married, and he did get married last year, but we were going to do the bachelor party in Ithaca because that's where we all went to school. So I try and get out as much as I can. It's probably been a year and a half or 2 years since I've been back out there, but like I can't wait to get back. It's a great town. It's home. It's home in some senses. I think when you have kind of formative experiences and you have, some of the coolest years and the most important years of your life in one place, that place becomes, one of your forever homes. And that's how Ithaca is for me.
And we hope you were able to come back soon. Obviously, circumstances are difficult for anyone to come back on campus, but hopefully, eventually, it'll get cleared up. Now, you mentioned how Ithaca feels like home, but you're also a host, or you're working at a radio station in Boston. So, are there really any similarities between Boston and Ithaca?
Um, Not really, which is one of the reasons I loved Ithaca so much. I mean, listen, like I mean, Ithaca is just it's a great college town in the Northeast. So you get a lot of that, and you get people from Boston, you get people from New York, and you get people from Philadelphia, and all of those cities. I think all those northeastern cities have so much in common. So it was like, but Ithaca was such a great melting pot with all of those people, and one of my best friends is from California who went to Ithaca, but like you get that whole experience. So, I mean, the city in and of itself, like Ithaca, is just so different, from Boston, which is one of the things I loved about it. But I don't know, like Amherst, Massachusetts, like it's kind of similar. It's a college town. Burlington, Vermont, New England towns, like there are some similarities, but still, it's not Ithaca is not, one of the top 10 largest cities in the country, which is why one of the reasons I chose to go to Ithaca, because I didn't want to be in a city at that time. I wanted to be, a little away from home, but still being a drive away from home. And it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect for me. But I mean, it's still like, I'm sorry, I'll put Ithaca up there with any of the great college towns, in the country, whether it's Burlington, Vermont, which is a great college town, or like anything. Like, I mean, really, I'll put Ithaca right up there with any college town. It's top notch. It's the best. It's a great place.
Now, I saw on Twitter you have a nickname of McTakey. Is that something you developed at Ithaca? Is that something at the Hub, or is it something even from something totally separate?
No, it definitely was not an Ithaca thing. I developed it at the Sports Hub. A couple of the hosts started calling me McTakey just because I guess they felt I had strong takes on sports, which I guess is part of the job. It's very much a part of the job description. So one guy, kind of started calling me that after I don't even know what I said, but he thought it was a hot take, and he was like, "Oh wow, like McTakey over here," and it just kind of stuck. So that's kind of the background to that, and. My approach is embrace whatever people give you, and they gave me that, and I said, sure, I'll go with it. So it kind of stuck a little bit.
Now, what do you think is the hottest take you've ever made in sports or in anything?
Oh boy, hottest take I've ever made in sports. That's a tough one. I hate to say that, like, I don't really know, because I think I'm sure you've had this experience as well doing broadcasting. You kind of go on the air, and this is my approach. I say what comes to mind. I say what is top of mind, and I kind of move on from that. And it's not contrived. It's not, I don't sit there before the show saying I'm going to say this to get this type of reaction. I guess I've just learned over the years to really kind of let the filter go away a little bit, which is maybe where some of the, the stronger opinions come from. But, I mean, that's, I think, one of the ways. It's not the only way to be successful in the sports business, but it's just a way that's become natural to me. It's the type of thing where I have gotten so comfortable offering my opinion on sports, ripping people, in the sports world. It's somebody's got to do it. It's a tough job. I know it's a really tough job, but I'm willing to do it. But I guess my hot take right now is that Cam Newton isn't very good. I think Cam Newton is kind of overrated, and really, for the most part, has been a mediocre quarterback throughout his career. And maybe we're going to figure that out here in New England soon. But I mean, I was ripping the Patriots offense in like the third quarter of the Seattle game, being like, this unit's limited. They kind of stink. They suck. And then, of course, like, they put up 31 points, and I've got people coming at me on Twitter being like, McCarthy, nice one there. I stand by it. I'm going to be proven right on it.
Say, you looked a bit, I mean, your take looked a little bit better after last week's games, but there's a account, I don't know if you know it, called Old Takes Exposed. So is there any takes you had that, like, were just awfully bad, like just completely wrong and, like, completely outrageous? Like, just that's how bad it was.
All the time. Listen, if you're going to go on a radio show for 4 hours a day, you're going to get probably the majority of things you say wrong. I'm wrong all the time. That account has retweeted me, like, all of those. Literally, I kid you not, Michael, my first take on 98.5 The Sports Hub. So I kind of backstory. I got the job in a fluky freak way, less than a year out of Ithaca. There was a public search contest for an opening at the Sports Hub, and I won the contest, which was like the craziest way to ever get a job anywhere. It was so fun. It was so wild. I still can't believe I was so lucky. But so the way they did it is they brought you on the air for an audition with a couple other people, and we were the finalists, and we went on the air for an audition. I kid you not, literally my first take, this is 2013, the summer of 2013, was that John Lester wasn't an ace and the Red Sox, needed more from him. Of course, he goes on, basically wins them the World Series that year, is a complete and total. So my first take was dead wrong. But I don't think being right or wrong is necessarily important in sports radio. We are not a fact-based business. We are an opinion-based business. oftentimes I think when you're wrong, it's more wildly entertaining than when you're right, because nobody wants somebody to get up there and say, I was right, I told you so. Everybody wants to line up the phone lines for 4 hours and rip you for being wrong because you've been so public in a stance and so public in a take about something that when that thing goes completely wrong and completely haywire, you got people tweeting at you, you got people tuning in to hear you like get yours. That's fun. That's a lot of fun. So I don't really worry about being right or wrong with sports opinions. I know I'm going to be wrong probably the majority of the time. That's let's be honest, that's the opinion game. You're going to be proven wrong many times, so many times. But you just kind of have to embrace it, because my approach here is that we're not doing anything. I say this all the time. Like, there are people down the road at, Mass General Hospital who are trying to save lives or trying to cure awful diseases or trying to do like actual important things that matter in the world. I'm just here talking about sports. So don't take yourself too seriously. Don't worry about being right or wrong. That's not important. The only thing that matters to you if you're a sports talk radio host is, am I getting somebody to listen? Am I getting somebody to react? Am I getting them to stay on this channel and not go to another channel? And you know what? One of the best ways to get them to stay is if you had a take totally blow up on in your face, and everybody gets to call in and rip you and tell you how wrong you were. So like, that's just fun. Embrace it. Anybody who takes it seriously, like, come on, like, we didn't get into sports to be serious. We got into sports because we love it and sports are fun. We got into sports because we didn't want to do a 9 to 5. We didn't want to do a serious job. So I'm never concerned about being wrong. In fact, I think it's sometimes even better if you are.
Fair enough. Fair enough. A lot of good points there. Now, we've seen a couple times with takes, especially with Skip Bayless, where it's risen to a level where it's gotten, player confrontation with them or player calling them out on social media and it getting a little bit personal. Has that ever happened with you in terms of any of your takes about, Boston players or New England players or any team's players?
Not publicly. Nobody has ever taken me on publicly. I've heard things behind the scenes, like, I was vicious. I was vicious towards the Celtics last year, justifiably so, by the way. The Kyrie Irving Celtics. I went after that team basically all year long, and we have a producer at the station who knows a lot of people over at the Celtics, and I was making a joke about how I was ripping the Celtics. He's just like, "Oh yeah, trust me, they know who you are," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay," but it is what it is. Like, I am never going to be afraid to criticize somebody for what they do on the field, for how they construct a team, for how they manage a game. That's all fair. That's all fair game. I'm never going to criticize somebody personally. I'm never going to criticize somebody for something outside the lines, of sports, because I think that's where it crosses the line. And, it is important that we do maintain our partnerships. We at the Sports Hub have, the New England Patriots, the Boston Celtics, and the Boston Bruins. We carry all of their games. Those partnerships are extraordinarily important to us. So am I going to personally, rip the Crafts, Bill Belichick personally? Am I going to rip, Danny Ainge personally, like as a person? No. Will I criticize them for letting Tom Brady walk out the door? Absolutely. Will I criticize them for, drafting N'Keal Harry over DK Metcalf and Brown, the kid in Tennessee? Like, I'm gonna rip them all day. I'm gonna do that. But to me, that's fair game, because that's the sports world, and you mentioned Skip Bayless too. Like, I think it's important that when you go on the air and when you give an opinion, that it's not contrived and that it's not fake and that you believe what you say. Because if you don't believe what you say, you're just a fraud. Sometimes maybe you can play it up a little bit more strongly than you believe, but at your core, you need to believe what you say, because if you don't, then you're just a fake artist. Like, nobody wants that. And I truly believe that people see through that and they say, this guy's just a fake and he's a phony and he's making this up. You don't want to be that guy. I certainly don't want to be that guy.
Fair enough. And I see wearing the Patriots sweatshirt, and I know you're a Boston sports fan based on your tweets and your posts and stuff like that. So I'm going to have a few of those for you.
Sure.
First one will be the Red Sox had a pretty down year, especially after the last season. Even last season, they were still in contention for most of the year. They did show some good young pieces, but how much longer do you think this team's going to be rebuilding before they're going to be back competing with teams like the Yankees, the Rays, and maybe even now the Blue Jays?
I think it's a long time. I think their pitching stinks, and that's the real problem. Is that listen? This team has still one of the highest payrolls in baseball. They move on from Mookie Betts, the second best player in baseball. They don't get a pitcher in return. Like who does that? Like go throughout the history of baseball, find me a player of Mookie Betts's quality who's ever been traded, and you don't get a pitcher in return. Like it's just completely inexcusable to me. So I think even though they are the Red Sox and they do have all the resources that you could ever want. I mean, I just don't think that this is a quick turnaround like we've seen from them in the past. Like 2012, they have the Bobby Valentine year. They finish in last place. They win the World Series next year. They're not going to do that next year because they don't have the pitching, and you can't fix that overnight. So I think this is a more long-term rebuild for the Red Sox, which is frankly unacceptable here in this town, particularly when you're competing for the sports, the attention of Boston sports fans. They're a distant fourth right now. And that's not good for the Red Sox. That's not good for baseball. Baseball needs the Red Sox to be relevant. Baseball needs all of the big franchises to be relevant, particularly in a time where I think there are a lot of threats to the health of the national pastime. So that's not good. But I think this is a very long rebuild for the Red Sox. And let's see if they do it patiently, because they probably won't. Listen, if they have back-to-back losing seasons, that doesn't fly around these parts. And then they'll probably panic. They'll probably start throwing money around, and you get Pablo Sandoval 2.0. Like nobody wants that. But I do not feel good about the state of the Red Sox right now, and they shouldn't feel good about it either.
Fair enough. What are your thoughts on Dave Dombrowski? Because he did bring you a championship, but a lot of the problems you're seeing with the Red Sox now in terms of the depth they have and just the players they have in terms of money wise is hampering them, as you kind of said. So do you ever overall positive view of Dave Dombrowski's tenure with the Red Sox, or overall negative because of where they are now?
No, I mean, listen, they won a World Series, which is why you bring Dave Dombrowski in. I mean, when they brought him in, they were in a position where they had a lot of young talent. They essentially had developed, the core of what that 2018 team was. And they just had a general manager who was unwilling to be aggressive, to go out, sign David Price, trade for Chris Sale. Like that never would have happened under Ben Sherrington, who's the GM of the Pirates now. So I do look back at Dombrowski's tenure extremely positively, because listen, he came in at a time where they needed somebody like that, somebody who was going to go all out to build a champion, and that's what he did. Now, the problem I have is that you let him stick around for 1 year after that, when you knew you weren't going to bring him back, and you didn't start the rebuild right then and there, because, and this is something we've talked about a lot in Boston. John Henry has come out, the owner of the Red Sox, and said, after the 2018 World Series, he sat down with Dombrowski to kind of map out the future. And they had like two very, very different views of what the future was going to look like. So why do you leave a general manager in place, even if you just won a World Series, to be a lame duck? Because you essentially just delayed your whole rebuilding process. Dave Dombrowski came in and did what Dave Dombrowski does. And that is, I'm going to nuke my farm system. I am going to, build the best possible big league team that I can possibly build, and I'm going to try and win. And that's what he did in Detroit. It's why the Tigers are one of the worst teams in baseball right now. They never won, but the Red Sox did. So it's a success. Now you just have to deal with the repercussions from that. And I don't think the Red Sox have been smart in dealing with the fallout from the Dombrowski thing. You knew what was going to happen. It was okay what happened, because that's what they needed at that time. But I think they've handled everything since then poorly. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
Now you also have a hole at manager, as Ron Renicky kind of was like a stopgap manager after Alex Cora was suspended and then fired or he quit or whatever from the team. And now you don't have a manager right now. So who do you think they should hire, and who do you think they will hire?
I think they're going to bring Cora back, and I think they should bring Cora back. And listen, is the guy a dirty, rotten cheater? Hell yes, he is. Is the guy, a stain on baseball? Absolutely. Do they need him? Yep, they do, because Alex Cora connected and got the most out of the most important players on this roster. When Cora came in, he changed the culture on this team, and helped Xander Bogaerts develop into one of the best players in baseball, because Bogaerts was not flourishing under John Farrell. There was a difference in kind of opinions. Bogaerts is like a pat on the back guy rather than a kick in the butt. And John Farrell was more a kick in the butt guy, whereas Alex Cora came in, connected with him, and, Xander Bogaerts has flourished. Eduardo Rodriguez, who's their best pitcher, flourished under Alex Cora. Rafi Devers got into shape under Alex Cora. Cora is a guy from the Caribbean. He's a Latin guy. He connects with guys from the Caribbean. He connects with the Latin guys on the team. That's the most important thing. So I think they need him back. I do. And I anticipate that they will bring him back because ownership loves him. Ownership loved Cora. They didn't want to fire him. They felt they had to. And that's why they worded it the way they did. They agreed to part ways. They did not want to do it. And when Major League Baseball's investigation into the Red Sox came out that found Cora didn't do anything, not that I necessarily believe any of that, but listen, there's an investigation on the books that said Cora's transgressions were with Houston only and not with the Red Sox. So I think that gives them the leeway to bring him back, from a public relations standpoint. And I think he probably will be the manager here moving forward. And I think ultimately that's a good thing, even though I fully admit he's a dirty, rotten cheater. But when has that ever stopped anybody from Boston before?
Fair enough. And yeah, people thought the Astros were going to do that when they had hired Dusty Baker, but now Dusty Baker seems to be their long-term guy.
Mhm.
There was an interesting championship series for Red Sox fans because in the NL you have Mookie Betts and David Price's team, who were former Red Sox, against the team with Pablo Sandoval, one of their worst recent free agent signings. On the other side, you have a team in the AL East in the Rays, and then also a team that's also dirty, rotten cheaters and also beat the Red Sox one of those years in the Astros. So who were you rooting for in those championship series?
All right, listen, I guess I'm a terrible person. I was rooting for the Astros. I was, and here's why. Maybe, and I think this is one kind of perspective that I've gained, working in sports talk radio. Villains are good for sports. Villains are really good for sports. It's why the New York Yankees are probably the most important team in North American sports history. They're villains. They're the best villains. They can always outspend you. They win more than anybody else. You always hate the Yankees. You hate the pinstripes. But that's good. Baseball's good when the Yankees are good. The Patriots are one of the most important teams in NFL history. Why? They're villains. Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, there are always shady things going on. They always win. You hate for them, or you hate them. You hate, you love to root against them, but you always tune in when they're on, right? So I think baseball kind of needed that with the Astros, particularly in a crowded sports landscape. So I'm kind of bummed the Astros didn't end up there. I also think, listen, the Rays are a phenomenal story, how they, continue to be successful with, their limited resources. But I think a lot of the trends that the Rays have brought into baseball are not necessarily good. The opener, kind of nameless, faceless, more analytics based stuff. I don't think that's good for baseball. So I was rooting for the Astros and I was rooting for the Dodgers too. Just based on the fact that Astros Dodgers is instantly a story and guarantee you'd be watching, and we'd all be rooting against the Astros, but we know how the Dodgers felt like the Astros stole World Series from them a few years ago. I thought that would have been great for baseball, and particularly in a time where they've had to compete with all, three other major sports. Now the NBA and the NFL and the NHL are aside right now, but you would tune in. You would absolutely tune into that. And there are storylines there and there's just interest. I'm sorry, that's good for baseball. So I'm kind of bummed the Astros didn't get there. I don't want the Astros to win. I don't want them to be successful, but I think it's also good for the health of the sport. It sucks that this happened in the middle of this pandemic because it would have been a story every time the Astros came to your town, right? The Astros are here. I'm going to go to the ballpark and I'm going to boo the hell out of them tonight. And are they going to throw at Altuve for wearing the buzzer? All of those things. That's good for sports. Villains are great for sports. So the Rays, Glasnow's great. Snell's great. They're, good for them, but do they give you the juice? No, they really don't. So that was kind of the way I was looking at it. So I get one team, but not the other one.
I guess, but the good news, at least with that, is Chaim Bloom is, who was with the Rays, is now with the Red Sox. So I guess that's a good sign for your team in the rebuilding process, and especially because he's gonna have much more money to spend in Boston than he ever would in Tampa, even though he was never GM there.
Sure, maybe. I mean, let's see. Like is it like the Bill Belichick coaching tree where you hire everybody from the Patriots staff and they're massive failures because they worked under Bill Belichick and they never really had anything to do? Or is this like an actual system that works somewhere else? Like Chaim Bloom's first year here was not good, but like, let's give the guy time. Let's see. I'm not convinced. Like, just because he came from Tampa doesn't mean he's going to be successful. Now, it gives you hope, right? That, all right, here is somebody who has been successful or been a part of an organization that has been successful with extremely limited resources. Theoretically, when you give that guy resources and he's smarter than everybody else or more resourceful, like, you theoretically, that's like a match made in heaven. But let's see. I mean, it's worked out great for the Dodgers and Andrew Friedman, but Andrew Friedman ran the show there. Eric Nylander runs the show in Tampa Bay. Like, is Chaim Bloom, like in there making decisions, or is he just like running and getting coffee for the guy as his right-hand man? Like, we don't know. So like, let's see how he looks, when he's running his own operation.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, there were a couple of, a good amount of rule changes in baseball this year. Some temporary, although could become permanent in the next CBA, some permanent. So I guess, what were your thoughts? Which ones did you like? Which ones you didn't like? Which ones do you think are here to stay? Just your thoughts on all of that.
So I'm like a baseball traditionalist, so it takes a long time for me to come around on new rule ideas. I loved the runner on second base, like in extra innings. I thought that was great. I was always so opposed to that because it reminded me of like coaching Ithaca College club softball back in the day. And like, if we went to the seventh inning, like you put a runner on second base, I'm like, this is like, it's like, so like rinky dink, like, what is this? But I actually think it's great at the big league level. I like it. I don't particularly care for the 3-batter minimum. I understand why it's there. You're trying to speed the game up, but it just seems like such a half measure to me, when these games are still going 4 hours and we're playing, LCS games at 12:30 night Eastern. Like, that's like, nobody's staying up and nobody's watching these games. So like, I want to see baseball be more aggressive in their pace of play initiatives. I want to see a pitch clock. I want to see the television product reimagined to reposition commercial breaks, so we don't have to sit there twiddling our thumbs for 2.5 minutes in between innings while the games are taking 4.5 hours. So I want to see baseball continue to trend in the direction that speeds the game up, because I think it's the most important thing. And it's one of the many reasons why I don't like the designated hitter in both leagues. Again, I'm a traditionalist. I love the National League style, even though I come from an American League town, an American League city. I love the strategy behind it, but also it speeds the game up. Having a sacrifice, bunt at the bottom of the order, or essentially an automatic out. I know people don't like that because they want to see the big fat guy get up there and hit a 3-run homer, but like, can we sacrifice that a little bit to make the game, be played in 2 hours and 50 minutes? Like, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. So I know that baseball is probably going to have a universal DH moving forward. It's just an economic issue. It's a jobs issue, for the Nelson Cruzes of the world, so they can, play until they're 45 years old and just hit bombs and not have to worry about playing the field. But I'm a traditionalist. I don't want to see the pitcher go away in the National League.
We'll see what happens in the next CBA. It should be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you mentioned earlier Cam Newton, and you don't think he's
Mm-hmm.
very good. So what's the future at QB like for the Patriots? Because usually a team to be good needs a good quarterback. Is it Jarrett Stidham? Are they going to try to draft someone this year? Are they going to try to trade for a young guy who's fallen out of favor like Sam Darnold or Dwayne Haskins? What do you see them doing at QB in the future, or what do you want them to do?
They have no future. That's the most important thing. That's the only takeaway that you can garner from any of this experience, as a Patriots fan going back to last March, is they have no future. You don't bring in Cam Newton on June 28th. When was the last time a good quarterback was available on June 28th? It never happens, right? You don't bring in Cam Newton that late in the game if you think that Jarrett Stidham is your answer moving forward. And here's why. You have to completely redesign your offense and reimagine your offense to play to Newton's strengths, which is what they're doing. They're running like a high school offense. Like, I mean, Ithaca College might be running a more, advanced offense right now, than the New England Patriots. It's basically run option. Like, that's what they're doing because they're playing to the strengths of Cam Newton. And I mean, when you get the guy going, you can't bring him down. I mean, he's just an unbelievable athlete, and he's so dynamic, when you get him on the move. Like, I'm not going to, rip the guy for that. I mean, it's he does some things that are just truly spectacular. But here's the thing. So you bring in Newton, you redesign your offense. What does that say about Jarrett Stidham? What does it say about Jarrett Stidham that he couldn't beat out Brian Hoyer? We all saw Brian Hoyer on that Monday night game in Kansas City. We know who Brian Hoyer is. If it's your second year in the league and you can't beat out Brian Hoyer, there's a problem there. So I think the Patriots, I think their plan was, that they were going to turn it over to Jarrett Stidham this year, and the offseason went along and they realized, oh crap, this kid isn't ready and he might not be ready and we need to figure something else out. I think their plan, is going to be year to year at this point, which I find unacceptable. You let Tom Brady walk away and you don't have a long-term plan. Like, that's the only justification for letting Brady go. He is basically a year-to-year quarterback. If you're going to go year to year, you go to year with Brady, not year to year with Cam Newton and Jarrett Stidham and Brian Hoyer. Like, I've got a problem with that. So I think they will look, they'll go back into the draft if they have to. They'll see if a Sam Darnold shakes free. And, you look at a guy like Ryan Tannehill, who just had putrid coaching his entire career in Miami, and he lands in Tennessee with a competent head coach in Mike Vrabel, one of the few competent head coaches out there. I think, the Patriots will potentially look to repeat that type of thing where they say, if somebody like Darnold shakes free, we take a chance and we say, you know what, we don't have Adam Gase here to ruin this guy. We don't have Todd Bowles here to ruin this guy. We have Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, and we can figure it out. That's probably their best course of action. And, maybe they franchise Newton. I don't know. But the point is they don't have a clear plan right now. And that is not good. That is not good in the NFL. We know that.
So what are your lists of the few coaches that are competent? I'm guessing one is Belichick. And one's Vrabel. Who's else?
Belichick, Vrabel, Pete Carroll, which is just unbelievable. But hey, listen, Pete's been successful. But hey, I grew up. Pete Carroll was the head coach of the Patriots when I grew up. Okay, and I thought Pete Carroll was a boob. And you see him lose a Super Bowl because he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to run the ball. He did his damnedest to blow that game in week 2 against the Patriots because he threw the ball again on 3rd and 1. You're just like, oh man, this is the Pete experience. But you know what? His teams are always there. So Pete's obviously on the list. Andy Reid is on the list. It is such a short list. I mean, Sean Payton, I guess, has to be there too, but they haven't won in 10 years. They're a massive disappointment every time they get to the playoffs. It's just so amazing. You see, it really makes you wonder about quarterbacks in the league, right? Tannehill's the perfect example. I thought that guy stunk. Tannehill stunk for the majority of his career. He gets somewhere where there's actually a competent head coach. He finds one of the few competent head coaches in the NFL, and you're like, wait a minute, they can win with this guy. He's actually not bad. So it's just, it just shows me that the quality of coaching in the NFL is just so bad. I mean, I've been watching all these Bucs games this year. Bruce Arians is awful. His teams are undisciplined. I thought he was one of the better coaches in the league. It's just the state of coaching in the league is just so bad. And you really appreciate it on a weekly basis when you see some of these things happen.
So have you been watching Buccaneers games because Brady and Gronk are there, or did you watch them also before for some reason?
Oh, no, I was not watching Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I would lie to you if I said I had watched 1 quarter of Tampa Bay Buccaneers football, probably since 2002 when they had John Lynch and John Gruden and they won the Super Bowl. Super Bowl, all right, outside of a non-Patriots game, I would say Super Bowl 37 was the last time I watched the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. No, I'm not wasting my time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's 1000% because Brady and Gronk are there and they're a must-watch every week. And the NFL is smart, man. They have put Buccaneers games on in Boston every single week. They have the Patriots and the Bucs have one conflict this year. They play at different times every single week. They're smart. They know people like me up here are going to be watching Brady every week because that's the storyline here. It's well, how do the Patriots look this week? How do the Bucs look this week? Who's going to be right? Who's going to be right in this breakup between Bill and Tom? It's so juicy and it's so gossipy and it's kind of gross, but you know what? At the same time, it's also a fascinating story. Today, it's, hey, Tom's got the advantage. Tom's got the upper hand. This is a story every Monday morning for us. Who looked better? Did Bill look better or did Tom look better? It's fascinating stuff. It is.
Yeah. I feel one day there may be a 30 for 30 or even more about them. But with Bill, he's getting up there. And I'm sure it's been talked about for a little bit. when is he going to retire? I know he's a great coach still, but he's also getting up there in age. And, there's been rumors about McDaniels replacing him. That didn't happen. And rumors he may move on at one point. I'm sure someone.
Yep.
But how long is he going to stay there and coach?
I think this was one of the kind of determining factors in the Bill and Brady breakup, is that I think Bill's timeline is much longer than we once anticipated. Here in Boston for the last decade, we have played the clip from the Bill Belichick Football Life on NFL Network in the 2009 season, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, where at the end of the year, Bill's talking to the camera and he says, I don't see myself being Marv Levy and coaching into my 70s. And we kind of had this timeline, in our minds that like, well, Bill's not coaching when he's 70. I think Bill's 68 or 69 now, and he's showing no signs of slowing down. He has his two sons on the staff, which has really, I think, changed his timeline. And I think Bill wants to go and break Don Shula's record for most wins as an NFL head coach. Bill hates Don Shula's guts, absolutely hates him, and would love nothing more than to break that record. So I think his timeline has now been reset. He needs probably another 4 or 5 years to do it. I don't think he's slowing down. I think Bill will be here for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't think he would have said that 10 years ago. I know it because he said it 10 years ago, and I think that allowed, Robert Kraft to allow Bill to kind of come up with or to say to Bill, like, okay, you can move on from Brady now because you're going to be here, because you want Bill Belichick to pick the next guy, right? You don't want Josh McDaniels picking the next guy. You don't want whoever the next head coach is, the Patriots picking the next guy. You want Bill Belichick finding who your quarterback is. There's no other, outside of maybe Andy Reid, there's no other person you'd want to pick a quarterback than Bill Belichick. So I think that in some ways led to the breakup happening because, let's not forget, 3 years ago now, the Patriots trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the San Francisco 49ers because Robert Kraft intervened and would not allow Bill Belichick to move on from Tom Brady at that point. So what changed over the course of 3 years? I think Bill's timeline was a factor, and I think he's sticking around a little while longer.
Now, moving on quickly to basketball, the Boston Celtics, they've made the Eastern Conference Final a lot recently, and they've just missed getting to the NBA Finals. They took it 6 games this year, took it 7 games a few years ago. So what do they need? Hayward wasn't healthy the whole series. I don't think that's the reason exactly they lost, but what do they need to add so they could actually make it to the NBA Finals for the first time in over a decade?
Guts and balls. That's really what they need to add. They really need to add, guts. They need to add that it factor, which they don't have right now. You think about a team with essentially 4 all-stars in a weak Eastern Conference where the Bucks get knocked out early. Like it's borderline unacceptable that the Celtics didn't make the NBA Finals. Now, they're not as good as the Lakers. They wouldn't have won that series, but I'm sorry, like they didn't have. This is the NBA. Talent almost always wins out. The Celtics were a more talented team than the Heat, but the Heat had Jimmy Butler, and the Heat had that kind of grit factor, that it factor, that that intangible thing the Celtics don't have. I think the Celtics team is, there's people say they're young and all, but they're experienced. Listen, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals essentially every year. I know that, they're young, but they still keep getting there, and they just don't have what it takes. They lost game 7 at home to the Cavs in 2018, but it wasn't LeBron James who beat you in that game. Like, you let Jeff Green come into your house and put up 20 points on you. Like, you score 1 bucket from the field, like 6 minutes to go. Like, that's just not having that, like, we're going to bear down and we're going to close this game out thing. So, I think they need that intangible it factor. How do you get it? I don't know. I think you have to count on the fact that Tatum develops into that killer at the end of the game that he just isn't now, because he's an otherworldly talent. He could be a top 5 player in the NBA. I have no doubt about that. But Jason Tatum is more talented than Jimmy Butler, but who would you rather give the ball to with the game on the line right now? You would give the ball to Jimmy Butler. So they need that factor, and they need a big man. They just do. Like, you're going to try and get past the Lakers in the NBA Finals and you don't have an answer for Anthony Davis. Like, Daniel Tice isn't going to cut it. So I think that's what they need. And it's just, I think people here in Boston were actually generally very positive about the Celtics. Celtics fans are like crazy sunshine and rainbows, whereas Red Sox fans are miserable. Bruins fans hate the team, and Patriots fans are a little bit more like, in Bill we trust, can never do any wrong. But like Celtics fans are normally very, very positive. But I sense a little bit of frustration finally with this team, and people felt like they should have been there. The road was there for them, and they couldn't take advantage. So they need to figure that out, and fast, because at what point do you just become like the Clippers or something, like a team that you just know is never going to get it done, or the Rockets? Like eventually you're going to say, well, Jason Tatum's 5 years into the league now, and this is who he is. And Jaylen Brown is 6 years into the league, and Marcus Smart is 8 years into the league. And you're like, eventually this is who they are. So they got to find that it factor somehow, and fast.
When you say all that, I keep thinking they need Aaron Baines back. I don't know if that's the permanent solution.
No, it's not. But I mean, listen, good role player, right? And they need a little bit of that toughness, because they didn't have that this year. I think they did miss Aaron Baines at times, but they need more of that mentality. The problem is, I think in the NBA, Michael, like a team takes on the personality of its best player, right? And the Heat, I thought they were kind of the scrappy little team that could, but that's Jimmy Butler. That's Jimmy Butler in a nutshell, right? Like this is a guy who's just going to, go out there and be grit and balls and do his thing. And that got them to the NBA finals. So I think the Celtics have taken on the personality of their best player in Jason Tatum. And that's just a little like, you don't really know what that is yet. And it's kind of like, you don't really know what the Celtics are at this point. They're immensely talented, but is that enough? In the NBA, generally it is, but for them, it has not been.
Okay, thank you. And final question I have, how has radio at the Hub changed due to the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of just mostly operations in general?
Yeah, I give so much credit to our bosses and the people at the Hub. They have done everything they can to keep us safe. We've got, it's like plexiglass, everything. They have done everything they can to limit the number of people walking into the building, walking into the studio, because, if one person, gets sick, then we have to shut the whole place down. And we've kept everybody healthy. For the first 3 months of the pandemic, everybody was working from home. And that was an enormous task that our engineering department had to undertake, because they had to get remote broadcasting equipment to every full-time employee, every full-time radio guy at the Hub, on air guy, and that's 3 guys a show for 4 shows a day. So that was a big ask. It was a tall ask, and they got it done, and they made it work, and our producers made it work. We have just extremely talented producers at the station. It is such a cohesive group, and it's such a cohesive unit, and it's a great place to work. And I think it's one of the many reasons we have the rating success that we do, is that it is a great work environment. And that's why I think one of the many reasons we were able to stay successful through the pandemic is people really banded together, and they did their job, and they were responsible, and they kept people safe. And if anybody even had a tickle in their throat, they stayed home, and they didn't those are the types of things. And it just made me appreciate how lucky I was to work there. And it is, the most successful sports radio station in the country right now. And I count my blessings every day that I'm there. And if it weren't for Ithaca College, I wouldn't be at 98.5 the Sports Hub right now, doing what I love, talking about the sports that I love in the city that I grew up in. It's truly a dream come true. And Ithaca gave me the tools and the ability to go out and make this dream somewhat of a reality for me. So I count my blessings every day that Ithaca was the first step along that journey, and what a place to land. It's just been incredible.
Yes, it was. Well, thank you so much, Matt, for taking the time to talk to me.
Michael, it was great. Anytime, like anybody from Ithaca, just let me know what I can do. And as I said, it's my home away from home, and some of the fondest memories of my life, are, being at the Park School, working on WICB. I made the friends of my life there. I can't speak highly enough about my time and about my experiences there. And I truly believe it's led me to, having a career that I love. So it's been awesome, and I really appreciate you taking the time with me.
Of course, I really enjoyed it. For WICB Sports, I'm Michael Memis.